Begin on the bottom of Chav Beis Amud Beis, the very last line. V'Amar Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara here mentioned regarding Shaul HaMelech that the reason why his kingdom didn't last was because when he was offended by someone and he was embarrassed, he did not respond. He forgave his honor. Because of this, his kingdom couldn't last. So the Gemara brings something else in connection to this. V'Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rab Shimon ben Yehoi Tzadok. Kol Talmid Chacham. Any Torah scholar that does not take revenge and does not bear a grudge like a snake for someone that offends him and so on, ain't a Talmid Chacham. He's not a Talmid Chacham. Okay, so what does the Gemara mean by this? That a person that's a Talmid Chacham should take revenge, should bear a grudge like a snake? There's a maimer from the Friedrich Rebbe actually in Basi Legani. In one of the Oasis in Basi Legani, the Friedrich Rebbe explains, and it's based on the continuation of the Gemara here, that the point is that the Talmid Chacham has to stand up for the honor of Torah. A person that's a true Talmid Chacham and he gets offended, it's not just his personal, him as an individual that got offended. Someone is offending Torah. And therefore you have to stand up for the honor of Torah. But the Gemara asks on this, Vaksiv, doesn't the pasuk say, Loisikim v'loisitar? You're not allowed to take revenge, you're not allowed to bear a grudge. So how can we say a Talmid Chacham should be a noikim v'noiter like a snake? So the Gemara answers, Ahu b'mamanu d'chsiv. That pasuk is only regarding money matters. The Tanya, as it says in the Braisa, describing what these two lavin of Loisikim and Loisitar are. Eizi nikim, what's the example of a person that's taking a revenge? And veizi netira, and what exactly is the lav of a person bearing a grudge? Nikime, so the example for revenge is the following. Omaloi, somebody tells you, Hashileni maglach, lend me your sickle. Amaloi tells him, Lav, no, I'm not lending it to you. Lamachar Amaloi, the next day he comes to his friend and says to him, Hashileni kardumach, lend me your hatchet. Amaloi eni mashilcha, I'm not lending it to you, Kederach shaloi shaltani, just like you didn't lend me your sickle. Zu inikime, this is taking revenge. Veizi netire, and what is a person bearing a grudge? Amalei, he said to him, Ashileni kardumach, lend me your hatchet. And Amalei, and he answers him, Loi, no. Lamachar Amalei, then he comes back, his friend comes to him tomorrow and says, Hashileni chalukach, lend me your shirt. Amalei, and he says to him, Heilach, here, I'll give you my shirt. Enik, maisach, I'm not like you, Shalaya Shaltani, that you did not lend me your hatchet. Zui netira. This is a person that's not taking revenge, but he's still bearing a grudge. So these are these two lavin of leisikim and leisita, not only not to take revenge, but not to bear a grudge either. So how do we say that a Talmid Chacham should be noiker v'noiter kenachash? So the Gemara answers that this is so right. That was the Gemara's question. So the Gemara here explained that this was only for money matters. So the Gemara now asks on this, but v'tzara de gufe loy, is this lav? Is there an issue only if you're bearing a grudge or taking revenge from money matters? But if you're causing someone else physical pain, not in money matters, is there no issue of loisika and loisitar? Or is it not forbidden to take revenge when it's a tsar, a physical tsar of the body? V'atanya, but we learned in the Braisa as follows. Hane lovin, someone that gets insulted, but ve'ein oilvin, and they don't insult back. Shoym and cherpasan, they listen to them being embarrassed. Ve'ein meshivan, and they don't respond. Oisin meyav, they serve Hashem with love, usmeichen b'yisurim, and accept any pain that comes to them with joy. Alei and akasavayim, regarding them the pasuk says, va'oyavav, the ones that Hashem loves, kitseis Hashemish b'gvurasei, like the sun that will come out with its might when Mashiach comes, they will experience those great revelations when Mashiach comes. Alter Rebbe brings this actually in Tanya, Perik Chavav, and there the Alter Rebbe explains that any time there's pain and suffering in the world, although it's very hard for us to understand, but the fact is, it comes from a place which is Hanestares La Hashem Elokeinu, comes from a place which is concealed, and only Hashem understands what it is, which means that it really comes from a higher source. It comes from a world that's called Alma de Eskasia, a concealed place. When Mashiach comes, the source of that pain and suffering will be revealed. As it says, Oitcha Hashem ki anaftabi, we'll thank Hashem for that pain and suffering. Those people that accept the pain and suffering, b'simcha, because Hashem gives it to them, when Mashiach comes, they will see the intensity of that revelation that they experienced in this world. So over here we see that it says that a person should not insult, even if he gets insulted, he should not take revenge, even though it's not a money matter. So how can we say that a Talmid Chacham should be noikim v'noiter kenachash, he should take revenge and bear a grudge? So the Gemara answers, La'olam the nakat lebelibe. You're right. When it said before about a Talmid Chacham to take revenge or to bear a grudge, it doesn't mean that he should insult. he keeps it in his heart. He shouldn't insult, but in his heart he should keep a grudge against the other person. That is allowed. And Rashi here adds to that, if someone else will stand up for this Talmud Chacham's honor, so then you should allow someone to come and stand up for your honor, for the honor of Torah, really, and allow him to answer back. But you yourself should not insult. But the Gemara asks, even if he keeps it in his heart, it's also not the right thing, because Rava said, Kol ha'mavir al midaisav, anybody that forgoes and walks away from his own feelings, even if he was offended and he feels bad about it and he just gives up on it, ma'avirin lo al kol pshav, he gives up, the Eibishter that is, will forgo and will look away from all of his sins. So we see that it's demanded of a person to not at all pay attention to when he's being offended. So that should include even a Talmud Chacham. So the Gemara answers, the Mefaisalei or Mefayis. This is only by a Talmud Chacham. If he was asked forgiveness, so then he should forgive someone that offended him. But if whoever offended him, which in essence offended the honor of Torah, did not ask for any forgiveness, so then you should bear a grudge, and if someone is standing up to protect your honor, which is really the honor of Torah, you should allow him to do so. And if you don't, then you're not really a Talmud Chacham, because that means that the honor of Torah is not important to you. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, that when they made the lottery and the Kainim stood around in a circle and each one stuck out a finger, so what did it say in the Mishnah? They stuck out 1 or 2 fingers. So the Gemara asks, if you can stick out 2 fingers, achas mibaya, does it need to say that you can stick out 1 finger? So why is it saying 2 or 1? Rav Chisda explains, Loi kashya. What the Mishnah says, it's not a question. Sometimes it's 1 and sometimes it's 2. Kan bebari, healthy person that the movements of his fingers are not a problem for him, so he sticks out only 1 finger. We don't want to get confused in the counting. And kan b'chayla, person that's sick and his hands are very frail and he can't stick out 1 finger. If he's going to stick out 1, the other one comes along with him. Person that's older. So then he's allowed to stick out 2 fingers. And Vatanya, this is what we learned in the Braisa, achas moitziin, that the first the Braisa says you only stick out 1 finger, and shtayim ein mitziyin, you don't stick out 2 fingers. And then the Braisa explains, but when is that said? Bebari, person that's healthy. Avul b'chayla, person that's sick, afil shtayim mitziyin. So he sticks out 2 fingers if he can't stick out 1 alone. And then the Braisa concludes and says, v'hayichidin, and those few individuals, referring to these sick people that stick out 2 fingers, mitziyin shtayim, they stick out 2 fingers, ve'ein meinin lehen, but we don't count, ve'ein meinin lo ela achas. We only count 1 of those fingers. We don't count both fingers that he sticks out. Okay? So the Gemara asks the question, so here it says that that the Gemara explained it, that a sick person sticks out 2 fingers. However, even when you stick out 2 fingers, you don't count both fingers. You only count 1 of those fingers. So the Gemara asks on this. But Vatanya, in a different Braisa we learned, Ein Maitziin, you don't stick out loy shalosh, shlish, you're not allowed to stick out the 3rd finger, which is the middle finger, v'loy gudel, and not the thumb, because of people that are tricking you, that they're going to cheat, and they're going to see that the number they have, if they can calculate very quickly when the number is going to end, so then they're going to stick out an extra thumb and it's going to seem like it's from someone else and it's going to be counted extra, or they're going to stick out the middle finger, it's going to be counted extra, so you're not allowed to stick out those 2 fingers. Then the Braisa says, if he did stick out the middle finger, it is counted. So b'diavad, if it was stuck out, it's counted. Gudel ein meinelai. But the thumb, if it was stuck out and they realized the mistake that happened there, that he stuck out his thumb, then it's not counted. Not only this, a person that sticks out the thumb, what do they do with him? He gets lashes from the one in charge there with a pekia, which the Gemara will soon explain. A pekia is some kind of a whip that they hit him with. So what do we see from this Braisa? That if a person sticks out the middle finger, even though you're not supposed to, but if you stuck it out, it seems to say in the Braisa that it is counted. So before we said, when a person sticks out 2 fingers because he's sick, and he can't stick out just 1 finger, so we only count 1 finger. He stuck out 2 fingers, but we don't count both fingers. Now we're saying a person that stuck out even their 3rd finger, we do count it. So the Gemara explains, no, that's not the pshat in the Braisa. My meinin loy, when it says if he stuck out his 3rd finger that we count, nami achas, it only means we count 1 finger. It means not like a person that stuck out his thumb, that we don't count him at all, and we give him lashes. A person that stuck out his middle finger, we count, but we only count 1 finger. We're not going to count that middle finger. So now the Gemara explains what this word means. My pekia. What does this word mean that he gets lashes from the memuna bepekia? What is pekia? Amarav, so Rav said, madra. Pekia is madra. So the Gemara asks, my madra, what is madra? Amarav Papa, Rav Papa said, metarke detai. This is the whip of the Arab merchants, the pasuk reishe, and that the tip of the whip was cut up into pieces, so this to hit the horses with this, it had a stronger effect. So this is the kind of whip that was used. So now in connection to this word of pekia, the Gemara says, Amar Abaye said, Mirei shava mina. I used to think, Hadetnan, this that it says in the Mishnah, Ben Bevoi memuna ala pekia. That Ben Bevoi in the Beis Hamikdash, he was appointed on the pekia. We learned this in Masechta Shkolim. That was so. What's pekia? So I said the meaning of pekia is psilta. His job was to take care of the wicks that were used for the menorah. Keditnan, as it says in another Mishnah, mi baloya michnasei akainim, from the clothing of the kainim, the worn out pants, and from the belt that was worn out. Mehenoyim mafkiin. So they would take it apart. The word pekia means to take apart. So they took it apart and they would make it into wicks, and strips of wicks to light the menorah. But then, kivin the sheman lahad Tanya. Once I heard this that it says here in this braisa, and it says that you get lashes from the one that was appointed on the pekia. Amina, I said, my pekia nagda. So now I said that pekia refers to the whip that was used for lashes, for the kain that misbehaved. And there was also other instances when it was used for situations when people misbehaved. They used this pekia, they used this whip. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, so in the beginning, how did they make this lottery? How did they decide who would be the one to go and remove the ashes of the Mizbeach? They would race up the Mizbeach and to see who got to the top of the Mizbeach first. And then there was once a case when they both came up to the Mizbeach and one came ahead of his friend, and one of them, from running up, he broke his foot and he fell down. And then they stopped it. Tan Rabbanon and Abraisa, we learned the following story. Pushed him off. Is that what it said in the Mishnah? Let me see one more time. So the lashon that it says is, yeah, v'dochav echad men es chavere, one pushed his friend off, yeah, v'nofav v'nishbara ragla. Correct. So now it brings a braisa that brings a story that was much worse. Tan Rabbanon and the braisa said, Maise, the story was with shnei kayanim, with two kayanim, shoy shneim shovin, they both came, they had a tie. V'rotzim v'olim b'kevesh, and they ran up the ramp, and at the end, one of them came into the 4 amas at the top of the Mizbeach, shal chavere, before his friend. And what happened? Notal sakin v'tokale beliba. He took a knife and he put it into the heart of his friend and he murdered his friend. Amad Rab Tzadik. So after that happened, Rab Tzadik got up al mailas ulam, on the steps that there are in front of the ulam, v'amar, and he said, Acheinu Beis Yisrael, our brothers the Yidden, Shimu, listen. Harei Oime, the pasuk says, and this is the psukim by Egla Rufa, Ki yimotza cholol ba'adama, if you find a dead body on the ground and you don't know who killed him, v'yotza zikenecha v'shivtecha, the elders and the judges have to come out and do the mitzvah of Egla Rufa. Anu, over here, us, al mi lahavi Egla Rufa, who should bring the Egla Rufa? Ala'ir, is it in the city of Yerushalayim that the mitzvah of Egla Rufa applies to, or for the kainim that are here in the Azara. The Gemara is soon going to explain why is he speaking about an Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa is only when you don't know who murdered that dead body that you found. And over here we know exactly what happened. The Gemara will explain in a moment. Go kol ha'am b'pchia, and everybody was crying about what happened. Ba aviv shaltinik, the father of this kain, of this child, this kain that was killed, came, umatze, and he found his son, kishum mefarfer, he was still sort of moving, he wasn't fully dead. Amar, and he said that Ehu kaparaschem, his death should be a kapara for you. Va'adayin b'ni mefarfer, and then he said, my son is still sort of alive, his neshama didn't fully leave yet, and therefore v'lei nitma sakin. The knife that was stuck into him did not become tameh yet. So take the knife of hektish, so it shouldn't become tameh. L'lametcha, so this part of the story is here to teach you, shekasha aleim tares kelim, yosem shviches damim, that it was more important to them that the kelim should not become impure then spilling blood. And this is also a pasuk where it says, then in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, v'gam dam noki, shafach Menashe har b'moed. There was a lot of blood that was spilled in the time of Menashe, adash and miles Yerushalayim pelepe. It filled Yerushalayim from one side to the other of so much blood that was spilled in his time period. So we see over here that in that time period, there was a lot of shvichas damim. The Gemara is going to get back to this in a second, but now the Gemara says, so we have this story that it says here, that there was a Kayin that Pashat murdered his friend, and then there was another story in the Mishnah where someone was pushed off and he broke his foot. So the Gemara tries to understand, which story happened first? If this story of this shvichas damim that he spilled blood, that happened first, so hashta ashvichas damim loitiknu payasa. If after this story, where there was someone that was killed and they still didn't change what they were doing, they still continued racing up the mizbeach, and they did not institute to make a lottery. So anishber raglei tekinu. So then afterwards, when someone broke his foot, then they did make that. They did institute to stop this. Why? Why only then did they change it? Ella, so we'll have to say the nishbera raglei kodem, the story of our Mishnah where someone broke his foot, that happened first. If so, the kivin the tekinu payasa. If after that story they already instituted to make a lottery, so arba amis ma'ay v'detayu. So how did the second story happen? And it says that they were running up to Mizbeach to get to the top, the 4 amis at the top. How did that happen if they already instituted to do it with a lottery? Hello, so the Gemara explains what happened there. La'olam the shvichas damim kodem. Really, this story brought here in the Braise where one Kain murdered his friend happened first, but they still did not institute to stop this. Because in Meikares Savor, in the beginning they thought, Akroi Balmuhu. This is an exception, this is an outstanding, it's something that happened, that they weren't concerned that it would ever happen again. But Kivin the Chazi, but then they saw that Afilim Mimela Asilu de Sakana. Then they saw that they were coming to Sakana, that they were running up and pushing each other. And it wasn't just two kainim, there were many kainim that were racing up together and they were pushing each other, and even unintentionally it brought to this danger that a kain broke his foot. Also they sakana, they come to this danger, to kinur Rabbanan payasa. So the Rabbanan instituted that they should make this lottery, this raffle. That's what happened here in the Mishnah. But now the Gemara comes back to explain what was Rab Tzadok saying. Rab Tzadok was speaking about Egla Rufa, which is when you bring this calf by a stream in a place where there's a person that's found dead and you don't know who killed him. Why was Rab Tzadok speaking about this here by this story? So we said, Amad Rab Tzadok al Mailas Ulam, he got up on the steps of the Ulam, V'Amar, and he said, Acheinu Beis Yisrael, my brothers the Yidden, Shimu, listen, Arei Oimiki Matzachol Bad Domam, Anan, so he was saying, Os al Mila Havi, who has to bring this Egla Rufa, Alair, is it the people of the city of Yerushalayim or Al Azaris? Or is it the people that are here in the Azara? So the Gemara asks, Yerushalayim, Basasuya Egla Rufahi? Do the people in Yerushalayim even ever bring an Egla Arufa? Even if there's someone found outside the city of Yerushalayim and you don't know who killed him, is there ever a mitzvah of Egla Arufa with the city of Yerushalayim? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa that says, Asar Advarim Nemru Yerushalayim. There are 10 things that were said about Yerushalayim. And one of them is that Eina Mevia Egla Arufa. There's no mitzvah of Egla Arufa with Yerushalayim. We learned this in the Gemara Shkolim. Rashi here brings it because Yerushalayim, according to one opinion, is the city that was not divided for the Shvatim. And the mitzvah of Egla Arufa is only for a city that was given as a Yerusha for the Yidden, for the Shvatim. So there's no inheritance, nobody owns any place in Yerushalayim, so there's no mitzvah of Egla Arufa. Another question on what Rab Tzadok was saying. The whole mitzvah of Egla Arufa is when you find a dead body and it's unknown who killed him. And here we know exactly what happened. We saw one Kayin that murdered another Kayin. Ella, so rather, when he was announcing this, he wasn't saying this as an actual halacha that's relevant, but he was just saying this to inspire the Eden and to show them, look what happened, and that people should cry about this, that they should realize. Okay, so that explains what he was saying. Well, he wasn't saying a halacha, it was just laharbes b'pchiyah. The next part of the story that it says, Ba aviv shel tirnik umatze kishu mefarfe. The father came and found that he wasn't yet completely dead. And Omar, and he said, Ariyu kaparaschem, should be a kapara, vadayim b'ni kayim, and my son is still alive. And he said that they should take the knife out, to teach you, shekosh aleim taras kelim yosim shvichas dam. They were more concerned about the knife being pure than the blood that was spilled. So the Gemara explains and asks actually, so what really happened over here? The question was asked, Shviches damim hu dezal? Does this really mean that spilling blood was something that was very light in their eyes? Their attitude towards the purity of the Kalim in the Beis HaMikdash, that was what it was. That didn't change. What happened was in that time period, spilling blood became very light in their eyes. And is that the point that the Braisa is saying? Or maybe it's the reverse. The severity of spilling blood in their eyes didn't change. But they were so particular and crazy about the purity of a knife in the Beis HaMikdash, and that's why it's saying that he was so concerned about the knife even more than the blood that was spilled in that time period. So the Gemara answers this and says, Toshima, it says in the Braisa, what did it say? The Braisa there before brought the pasuk midikanasav la talmuda. He brings over there the pasuk that says v'gam dam noki shofach Menashe, that there was blood of people that were killed in the time period of Menashe. So he's bringing the pasuk to point out to you that in that time period, so the ritzicha, murder, was something that happened very often, unfortunately. So Shema we see from here shvichas damim hu dezal, that killing became very light in their eyes. The value of life was very light in their eyes. V'taras kalim kedekayma kaima, but their importance of the tara of the kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, that didn't change. And the Mefarshim explain why the Gemara is getting into this. What's the reason the Gemara is discussing which one was more light in their eyes, which one was more severe in their eyes. And the Mefarshim say because there's different halachas when it comes to a person that we see him being over on one Aveda. Do we have to suspect him? Is he also suspected for something else? So the Gemara is trying to understand what could they be, what could you rely on them for, what do they still have to be suspected for. It's negayah to know regarding a chashud. That's what it's called in halacha. A person that's chashud, a person that's suspected regarding one thing, do we suspect him for other things? Okay, the Gemara now comes back to the halacha of Trumas Hadeshen itself. This whole Mishnah began with the halacha of removing the ashes of the Mizbeach. So Tana Rabbana we learned in the Braisa, Ufashat v'lovash begodem acherim v'hoitzias Hadeshen. So he takes off his garments, and then he takes out the ashes from the Mizbeach. So this actually does not refer to Trumas Hadeshen. There were two different Avedas, or two different things that were done in the Mizbeach. One is to remove the ashes every morning that was placed on the side of the Mizbeach. That's called Trumas Hadeshen. And then there's what's called Hitza'as Hadeshen. When the middle of the Mizbeach, there was the ashes that gathered over there, and there was called like a tapuach. It was like an apple sticking out in the middle of the Mizbeach. And then when there was way too much ashes over there, they had to remove those ashes from the center of the Mizbeach, and they took it all the way mechutz lamachna, outside, not put it at the side of the Mizbeach, but they took it out all the way outside of the machna. And the pasuk here says that when you do that aveda, you have to put on different garments, begodem acherim, to change your clothing. So the Gemara brings a discussion about this. Sheimani, so I would understand the meaning of this pasuk, kederech Yoma Kippurim. I would say that it's similar to Yom Kippur. Shepaishet bigdei kodesh, v'loivish bigdei chayil. That the pshat over here would be that when it says that he puts on different garments, that the Kohen takes off his holy garments that the Kohen wears, the Kohen Hedyot wears, and he puts on just regular clothing, bigdei chayil. Similar to a Kohen Gadol. Right? What does the Kohen Gadol do? The Kohen Gadol has the regular gold clothing, the 8 clothing he wears, and then he exchanges it for different clothing, for white clothing. So I would say that the same thing is over here. When it says that the Kohen that's taking out the ashes has to change his clothing, it means he has to change from his bigdei kohuna to bigdei chayil. Talmud Loimar, but then the pasuk here clarifies and says, no, that's not the case. Because it says, Ufashat es begodov, v'lavash begodem acherim. Take off your garments and put on other garments. It says a second time the word begodem. So therefore I say, makish begodem shaloivish lebegodem shepaishet. I compared the first time it says in the pasuk begodov, his garments, which are the garments of a kohen, to the second time it says begodem, which also have to be garments of a kohen, and not just any mundane garments. Mala alam bigdei kodesh, just as the garments in the beginning of the pasuk is the garments of the kohen, afkam bigdei kodesh. So too over here, the garments that the kohen uses to take out the ashes is also bigdei kodesh. So if so, the question is, so what is the meaning of the pasuk? When it says that he takes off his garments and he changes his garments, what does he change? In Kema Talmud Loimar Acherim, what is the meaning when it says that he changes his garments to different garments? It means pchusin mehen. It means that he wears garments that are of a lesser quality. Right? Usually the Kohen wears garments that are of good quality. But when he's taking out the ashes, so you get dirty from these ashes, so he takes worn out clothing, an older peer that he has, that he doesn't mind to get dirty. Rabbi Eliezer says a different shot. The way to read that pasuk is Acheirim v'hoitzi. You read it not begadim acheirim, but acheirim v'hoitzi, meaning others take it out. Limit ala kainim balei mumin. What this teaches me is that the kainim that are even balei mumin and they're not allowed to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, sheksherim lahoitzi adeshen. That they are fit, they're allowed to take out the ashes from the Beis Hamikdash, from the mizbeach. That's the chiddush of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, and so now the Gemara will explain this. Omamar, the master just explained. Acheirim means pchusin mehen. That the garments that you wear when you take out the ashes should be of a lesser quality. And the reason is because the Tana de Beit Rabbi Shmuel explained this, the Tana de Beit Rabbi Shmuel, Begadim Shabishal ben Kedera l'Rabbi, the garments that you wear when you are in the kitchen and you're cooking by the pots and so on, Lo Yimzik ben Kais l'Rabbi. Over there, when you're in the kitchen, you get dirty, so you don't wear the same garments when you come and you're actually serving your master. Therefore, over here as well, when you're taking out the ashes and you get all dirty, you don't wear the same garments like you wear when you do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe once spoke about this Gemara, and the Rebbe made a few points. First of all, the Rebbe made the point that l'chayre, if we're concerned about the begadim getting dirty, so then what happened when they did the shechita of the karbanis in the Beis HaMikdash and there was blood that splashed all over the place? They weren't concerned about getting dirty with that. Why are they only concerned about getting dirty with the ashes? So the Rebbe answers, the concern is not really about the dirt. The dirt in itself is not the issue. Because if it's part of an Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash, so that dirt in itself is not dirt, it's part of the Aveda, it's the blood of a carbon. But over here, we're talking about taking out the ashes outside the Machne, it's not an Aveda, it's not part of the Aveda of the Beis HaMikdash. So this kind of dirt, since it's not part of the Aveda, that's something that should not be with the holy begadim of the Big Day Kodesh. That's one point. Another point that Rebbe says is that the emes is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that says that they even allowed Kainim that were puzzled to do this avodah of taking out the ashes is also based on the same reasoning as Rabbi Shmuel says. Because usually the chef in the kitchen and the person that comes and has the honor to serve the king himself is not the same person. There's the chef in the kitchen and then there's the person that comes to serve the king. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says, there's the Kayanim that are doing the actual Aveda, they have to be on a higher level and they can't be a Balmum. But the one that's taking out the ashes, that's not an actual Aveda, that could be someone that's a Balmum. So therefore, the Rebbe explains, so what's the Pshat in the Tanna Kamma that disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer? He says that no, the same Kayan that does the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash, he's the same Kayan that takes out the ashes. True, he changes his garment, but it is the same Kayan that does both of them. So the Rebbe explains, from here we see an important point, that just like we know regarding all mitzvahs, that the lightest mitzvah and the most severe mitzvah, kalis shebekalis and the chamuris shebechamuris, should be equal in your eyes and you should fulfill every mitzvah, the same is also with the Kayanim. That the same Kayanim that do the greatest parts of the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash, they are also the ones that have to do this Aveda of taking out the ashes. Because all the parts of the Beis HaMikdash are what has to get done there and should all be equal, and only Kayanim that are fitting to do it should be the ones doing it. So this is a Gemara here that was discussing in the pasuk where it says V'hoitzi Sadeshan, regarding removing the ashes outside the Mizbeach, taking it all the way outside the Machna. But now the Gemara comes back and we'll discuss whether this argument here applies also to the Harama Sadeshan, which, as I mentioned, is only removing the ashes, putting it at the side of the Mizbeach. Amar Reish Lakish says, Kamachloikis ba'itza, kach machloikis ba'arama. The same argument that there is over here regarding taking out those ashes, those extra ashes that went all the way outside the Machne, same exact argument applies also regarding removing the ashes that was done on a daily basis that was placed on the side of Mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, machloikis ba'itza. The argument was only regarding removing the ashes outside of the Mizbeach, Avo Baharame, but regarding the ashes that were removed every day, placed on the side of the Mizbeach, Divrei HaKol Aveidahi. Everybody agrees that's an Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash, and only Kayanim that are not Bali Mumin could do this Aveda. So the Gemara now explains, Rabbi Yochanan gives us his reasoning. Rabbi Yochanan explains that the Harama Sadeshan is also an Aveda, but my time of the Reish Lakish. What's Reish Lakish's reasoning? Why would he allow a Kayan that's a Baal Mum to take those ashes off of the Mizbeach if it's also an Aveda? Al malach, so Reish Lakish disagrees, and he says, if you're going to say that the daily removing of the ashes, putting it near the Mizbech, is also an Aveda, so yesh lacha Aveda shekshera b'shnei kelim? Is there any Aveda that a Kohen Hedyot does only wearing 2 of the garments? If you look in the Pasuk, as the Gemara will quote in a second, what does it say there in the Pasuk? V'lovash HaKohen midoi bad u'michnesei bad. He only puts on the ksainas and the michnesayim, the shirt or the tunic and the pants. It doesn't say the other 2 begodim, his hat and the belt. It's not mentioned over there. So if it only says 2 of the begodim, it must be that it's not an Aveda. That's what Reish Lakish says. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees, and he says, no, Gali Rachmana b'ksainis michnesayim. The Torah is saying that when he does this, he should wear the shirt and the pants that the Kohen wears, but v'hu adin l'mitznefes v'avnit. It's self-understood that from this, that you also have to wear the special hat and the special gartel. Amaishna hani. Why does it mention these 2 only? Midoi bad. What is midoi bad? Midoi kimidosai. Midoi means that it should be according to his measure. Here it's teaching me regarding the ksainas that it shouldn't be too long, dragging on the ground, and it shouldn't be too short. And michnesei bad, when it mentions the pants, why is it mentioning here specifically the pants? Like the Tanya, it's like the Braisa that explains what we learn from this. From where do I know that the Kohen does not have anything on his flesh before he puts on his pants? The pants is the first thing that you put onto your body. So that's why the pasuk is mentioning these 2, but it's not coming to exclude the others. Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, what does he learn out? Why does the Torah say only these 2? So again, according to Reish Lakish, from where does he know these halachas that Rabbi Yochanan just taught from these 2? So midoi kimidasai, this halacha that your kesainas, the tunic, should not be too long or too short. Mida'afke rachmana b'loshem midoi. So it's because the Torah writes this word midai. It could have said ksainas. That's usually the word that's used. Why does it say midai? Shalei davar. So that comes to teach me again. So because it said the word midai, that comes to teach me that it should be his size, not more than that. The other halacha that Rabbi Yochanan taught, that he shouldn't wear anything on his body before the pants. From where does he learn this? He learns it from the words al b'sarei. He doesn't learn it. I mean, the Torah here is saying these 2, and he only is to wear these 2, not any others. These 2 begodim, and he knows these halachas that Rabbi Yochanan said from the added words that it says there in the pasuk, because it says al b'sarei and it says also the word midai. But Rabbi Yochanan says no, that you had to wear all 4 begodim. So this is the machlokes regarding haramas hadeshen, if it's an aveda or not.